Hello, my name is Georgia, and I use the pronouns they, their, and them. I am joining you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people. I have brown hair in a side part, hazel eyes, and I'm wearing a greenish blue dress with dogs on it. I am proud to be your guide for this webinar, and I'll be helping facilitate this important discussion on early childhood. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that even though we are meeting virtually, I'm meeting from the lands of the Wurundjeri of the land on which we work, live, and play. We pay respect to the elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, always was, always will be. There is no justice without First Nations justice. I would like to encourage everyone watching to put in the chat what lands they are joining from. In today's webinar, we will talk about inclusion, including stories from us. Then we'll be talking about having a vision for the future. We will cover a range of topics across inclusion, language, and disability. This part will go for about 40 minutes. After this, we will have a 5-minute break. We will then come back together and talk about practical ways to start and have some final reflections. CYDA believes that hearing direct from young people with disability about their experience helps families, caregivers, and communities to have high expectations and aspirations for all children. We ask today that we are all respectful of one another and we are inclusive. Sometimes in talking about our experiences, we might get a question or cover a topic that is sensitive or includes tough things to hear. We use content notes, or we will warn you that what we are about to talk about is, for example, ableism or discrimination. People can choose not to hear this sensitive information. Later on, we might not want to answer a particular question, cancelling the question or shutting down the conversation. We want to make sure everyone's needs are met, yours and ours. Each panelist will introduce themselves, but today we have with us Mac and other youth hosts. The CYDA team, Sue, Miranda, and Liz, and an educator called...
So I'm not sure, Georgia, if Doreen's on yet, so we'll keep going though.
To be able to see the panelists, please use the speaker view, not gallery view. Most people will be able to change this by selecting speaker view. Please check that your screen name is correct and add your pronouns, i.e. she, her, they, them, or he, him. I will now ask each panelist to introduce themselves and also share with you the headline of their favorite childhood memory.
Hi, my name is Mac. I am one of the other facilitators for tonight. I go by he, him pronouns. I am calling in from the land of the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation. A visual description of me is that I have short, dark, curly hair. I am currently wearing a yellowy mustard beanie, but you can't really see it because it's covered behind all of the hair. I have got olive skin and brown eyes. I am wearing a blue button-up that's short sleeve with yellow flowers, but because they're so small, they're very hard to see. And I also have a feeding tube that you can see on my face. My favorite childhood memories was our yearly trips to Fraser Island for my mom's education renewal for work that she'd have to do each year to further her training.
Thanks, Mac.
So Georgia, do you want to tell us what your favourite childhood memory is? And then I can take over.
My name's Georgia. I'm 14. And as I mentioned before, I have dark hair in a side part and I'm wearing a bluish green dress with dogs on it. My favorite childhood memory was probably the day that I got my cat.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sue speaking. So my name is Sue Tape. I am from CYDA, so I'm one of the team that's joining you tonight. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm calling in from the lands of the Jugger and the Turrbal people. A visual description of me: I'm a slightly older than the rest of the panelists, a Caucasian woman with dark curly hair, and I'm wearing black glasses and wearing a dark shirt that has big bright spots on it. And my favorite childhood memory is of water. So in particular the beach, but any pool, river, lake or pond. And I'll hand over to Miranda.
Thanks, Sue. Miranda speaking. I also work for CYDA and I'm helping out tonight doing tech support. So if you have any issues, please message me in the chat and then hopefully I can help you out. There's a Q&A later too, and in the previous webinar, some participants opted to privately message me anonymous questions to then pass on to the panel. So feel free to do that also. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm calling from a Wurundjeri country. And a visual description is I'm wearing a beige coloured turtleneck because it's getting pretty cold in Melbourne. I've got glasses and shoulder length brown curly hair, and then my background is a white wall. And my favourite memory is following my brothers, my two older brothers everywhere, running amok with them, and yeah, just riding our bikes all summer long. Yeah, have really fun memories of chasing my brothers around. I'm going to pass back to Georgia.
Thanks, Miranda. Just some housekeeping before we begin. This webinar will have Auslan interpreting, which you'll be able to see on the screen along with the speaker. The session will have live captions and they will be visible at the bottom of your screen. But if for some reason you cannot see them, then click the CC button at the bottom of your screen to access captions. Please use the chat to ask your questions. The session will also be recorded to share with others. If you do not wish to have your face recorded, please ensure that your camera is off. If you are having any, please ensure your camera is off. If you're having any technical issues, please private message our webinar support person, Liz, in the chat.
We are now going to move to part 1. For this webinar and all others within this series, we will be sharing stories from young people. Think of our stories as planting a seed. We want to give you some prompts, some ideas, or some thought starters. We want to provoke thoughts, ideas, and actions that focus on including all children from an early age. We will give you a general direction, inclusion, but you will take the ideas where you want and what suits your child in your family. Sometimes these prompts will be in video form or a speaker in the webinar like today. Sometimes it might be an image or an object. I would like to now invite Georgia to share a story.
Thanks, Mac. I think being around animals is really important for all kids, but especially kids who can find social situations a bit difficult because pets love you unconditionally. A very happy memory for me is the day that we got our cat, Penny. We used to go to the Cat Protection Society quite regularly to spend time cuddling the cats and kittens. One day I was at home with my dad and grandmother, and my mum had taken my sister for a medical procedure. On the way home, they stopped in at the Cat Protection Society for some cuddle therapy. Mum rang and told Dad that there was a cat there that she wanted to adopt. Her name was Bree, and she was super friendly. Dad said we could think about it. There was no rush. But Mum was worried that she would be adopted very quickly due to her unusual nature. An hour later, Mum walked in the door with a big cardboard box, and Dad just said, "You didn't." And I said, "What's in the box?" Dad said Mum was playing a prank and pretending to have adopted a cat, but there was actually a cat in there. I loved Penny straight away. She is so dopey, and she catches skinks and carries them inside and puts them into her food bowl. Then she is confused when they get away. Once we had a mouse, and Penny kept looking at the mouse and then looking at Mum and meowing. I think she wanted Mum to catch the mouse for her. I also have an aquarium with 2 beautiful betta fish, which people might have heard of as Siamese fighting fish, and 4 neon tetras. It needs a fair bit of maintenance, but I enjoy doing it as it has increased my interest in marine life. Marine biology is one of the career paths I am considering.
Thank you, Georgia. We are now going to move on to a short activity. We would like everybody to think about things that you like to do as a young child. These could be things such as your favorite place, a special memory with another person, some activities that you enjoyed as a child, your food, games, a party, toys, animals, pets, music, books, arts, craft, whatever was things you enjoyed to do when you were younger. We would also like you to keep a record, as we'll be coming back to these things later on. So please individually write down, draw, imagine 2 things. Just keep a record in whatever format best suits you. There are some thought starters on the slides, but please take a few moments now to capture your thoughts. We will have 3 minutes and then we will come back as a group.
Just 1 more minute to jot down your thoughts of, or your memories really, of what you liked as a young child. Okay, we will come back to a list of favourite things later when we're talking about creating a vision for your child. If I could get you to go to the next slide, Miranda. We wanted to talk about inclusion as the goal now. So on the slide, you will see 6 cogs, and I'm going to go through each one of those. So this It Takes 6 communication strategy is developed by Every Child and a Racy. So this is the basis for the discussion, and you can find more detail about that at everychild.co. So if we're looking at the first cog on the slide, that is the slightly yellow tinged one, and it's talking about health, where every child should live a healthy life, physically, emotionally, and mentally. So as I was saying, there are 6 things that all children need to thrive, and inclusion is at the core of those 6. So the second cog that you can see on the slide is learning. So every child deserves access to high quality learning from the early years onwards. And the third cog, housing, so this is in a pinkish colour. Every child should have the basics of living, including a stable, secure home and with a decent family income. Next, and we'll be talking about this a little bit today, is the purple cog, which is a positive identity. Every child from every culture and background should be confident and respected. Our fifth cog is valued, so the blue cog there. Every child deserves to be valued, loved, and safe, living free from abuse and neglect. And the final, but certainly not least cog, the green cog, is participation. And every child should be able to have a say, connected into their family and their community life. And we'll definitely be talking about this in more detail later. So we hope that you see these 6 things as fundamentals, but also a reminder that children with disability or development delays or differences of any kind have the human right to have all 6 of those met, like all children. So moving on now to the next slide, we wanted to talk to you about CYDA's vision. So CYDA stands for Children and Young People with Disability Australia, as the national representative organisation for children and young people with disability. So as part of driving things like this webinar, CYDA's vision is that children and young people with disability are valued and living empowered lives with equality of opportunity. And within that, we want children and young people with disability to always be safe, fully included, respected, and valued. And we want them to be able to fulfill their education, work, housing, and independence potential and aspirations. We'll be talking more about that and asking Mac and Georgia to reflect on their vision and their aspirations as well. CYDA is also wanting for all children and young people with disability to enjoy strong connections, friendships, and evolving networks as they grow. We want families and communities that celebrate the talents and the strengths of children and young people with disability, and very importantly, to have high expectations for their future. And you can read more if you would like about CYDA's vision and our goals and how our work is trying to build that by checking out the vision and strategy on our website at cyda.org.au. So I'll hand back to Georgia now, who's going to talk about, sorry, excuse me, I've got the hiccups then, about the vision.
Let's look at how shaping a vision for young children. Let's look now at shaping a vision for young children and their families. I would like to call on Mac now to share their next story.
So when I was in kindergarten, it started off as like your normal kindergarten day. So I picked out my wardrobe. As per any other day, I decided to go with a green stripy long sleeve Teletubby t-shirt, some trackies. As a kid, you would never see me in any other pants than trackies. I think I only started wearing jeans in around year 8. So always trackies. I was also rocking a plastic tiara on my head. It was a pretty iconic look, and I'm very proud of my fashion sense back then. And we went to kindergarten to find all of the other kids dressed very fancily. Lots of the boys were wearing shirts nicely tucked in and some chino pants. The girls had their hairs perfectly done in braids or pigtails. Everyone was looking their best. We were a little bit confused towards why is everyone not dressing in their normal clothes, to then find out that it was photo day. And so here I am with the rest of my class in my casual clothing. I mean, to be honest, if it was my choice, I still would have worn that on photo day. And it's quite funny to look back on now with all of my friends. My mum was quite embarrassed at the time and figured that I was going to be embarrassed when I grew up a little bit. But we also thought it was a bit funny to be able to look down in the future. And then here I am now me and my mum constantly laugh about it now, and I love the photo so much. But as well as I went to kindergarten, then went to another school, then went back to a different school. And in that new school, a bunch of the same kids I went to kindergarten with were there. And my mum was like, oh yeah, you went to kindergarten with them. Obviously, I didn't really remember because I was so young, but all of the other kids knew who I was straight away from that photo. They were like, oh yeah, you were the kid in the Teletubby shirt and the tiara. And so it's always a running joke now when we see each other, because we often have friendship groups that overlap. So we might see each other here and now. And they always, when someone asks, oh, how do you know? They always bring that up. And so what started off as a possibly horrendous ending and lots of apprehension on, oh no, I'm not dressed all fancy in my best gear, ends up being a funny story that I always share with my friends, and we always end up having a good laugh about.
Thank you, Mac. In 2020, CYDA held the inaugural National Youth Disability Summit, and across 5 days, over 250 young people shared their ideas and insights. There were many, but we wanted to tell you about a couple that were important on the topic of inclusion in early childhood. They are disability pride. Young people express disability pride and a sense of community with other people with disability. Some young people also share that being actively involved in the disability community can lead to feelings of disability pride. Role models. In the presence of role models with disability enables young people to feel more included in the community. Young people value how role models present new options and help pave the way for different life pathways. Intersectionality. Young people share a commitment to elevating the voices of more marginalized members within the disability community who don't have a voice. This includes young people with disability who face increased structural and systemic barriers, such as young First Nation peoples and young people in the LGBTQIA+ community.
Georgia, can I get you to pause just there? And I think this is a great opportunity, Mac. I was wondering if you could reflect on your thoughts about things like role models, pride, and intersectionality, and things that you could share with what is an audience of family members and also early childhood educators as well.
So with the first one, I'll speak to all three. Disability pride, I think for me, was something very, very important to develop in regards to being able to live my best life. Disability pride means different things to different people. If you ask any disabled person, they will tell you something completely different. But I guess for me, it is about acceptance of your identity. It is also saying the joy in your life and seeing it as a part of your identity. And when Georgia was talking about how being actively involved in the disability community can help foster those feelings of disability pride, what that means is when you are around others who are also disabled, just like you feel less isolated and alone because you are no longer the odd one out, the other, or the less than, if that is how you're feeling, which I know as a young child, that was often some feelings there. But when you connect with others who are just like you, all those negative feelings that you feel about yourself and your identity and your disability decrease because you are around others who get it and are the same just like you, and you can start to see your disability in a more neutral light. For some, they see it as a purely positive, which is great. And for others, it then leads to a more of a neutral place instead of just a negative, which I think at least allowed me to really improve on my mental health and I guess get more comfortable with my life and live my best life. Role models are also great. I didn't really grow up with that many disabled role models in like the media, but when you do see representation, especially both representation that's your age, but also a little bit older, you feel seen. For example, I want to work in healthcare, which as a wheelchair user is going to be quite a few hurdles. But when I see other healthcare staff who are also in wheelchairs, that gives me hope for my future, which is, I also think is a really important aspect of having role models who are also disabled, whether that disability is the same as you or something similar or completely different. It gives you future for your hope up. It gives you hope for your future and allows you to think that I can get there. Because look, they've done it, so can I. And if you don't have those role models and you don't see yourself in those groups and those goals and dreams you have, then you can feel like, is this even achievable? Like, is this an option? So role models are super important, as well as having real life role models. So I had a teacher in year 8 who was also dyslexic. And I have to say she was my role model for that year. And having someone I could talk to who got the way my brain worked, got what I was struggling, could give me advice that was relevant and applicable because she had been there, not advice from somebody who read it, which is helpful. But having someone with that real life experience and having that role model was super powerful, especially for my schooling. I think intersectionality, I talk about that a lot as a queer person, as well as someone from a culturally and linguistically diverse background. Intersectionality is a huge aspect of my life. But I also think with disability, it's really important because historically and also still currently, disabled people aren't always given personhood. And for me, I see personhood as being seen as a whole. Whereas often with disability, that is all we are seen as, and we don't get given the space or opportunity to also be other things as well. I talk to people and they're a bit shocked that I say that I'm queer because they don't think that that's a thing because I'm disabled, and that's it. That's as far as things go. But as well as, say, when we are talking about access and inclusion, because that is a focus of these series, intersectionality is the key to it. Because without intersectionality, your access and inclusion is only going to support a certain group of people. It is not going to fit those who are experiencing multiple levels of marginalization. So we have to actively take an intersectional approach to make sure when we talk about access and inclusion, or when we talk about anything, we are really including everyone, as well as including those voices who are typically left out of the discussion.
And Mac, just one last question before we move on to the next slide. Outside of the disability community, who are your role models?
I think outside of disability, I see my role models, as well as I guess kind of some of them are also disabled, but they also have the same identities as me. There's someone called Is Hey. They're not going to be too big of a fan for me saying that they're a huge role model of mine. They're just a little bit older than me. We share quite a few identities, and getting myself early in the advocacy space, it was someone that I was like, that's what I hope to reach. Like, that's who I want to be. I also see Nouveau, who is a trans advocate. They have written a couple of books and done some public speaking. They were a huge role model for me, to kind of similar to Disability Pride and that journey I went on around changing how I view my transness and learning to see it away from a deficit model and understand that I can have joy and happiness and I can get comfortable in my body. So Nouveau was a huge role model in that regards. And I also think it's hard thinking like the names on the spots. It's like, but I also have to think my role models now, for me, having role models that were older than me were helpful when I was younger. But now I've seemed to find that most of my role models are more closer to my age. So I often see my peers in the advocacy space as role models too, because they have such great stories and messages and experience and knowledge that I hope to learn and grow from them. And I also see them as role models too.
Thanks, Mac. Georgia, I'll hand back to you for the next slide.
Thanks for that information, Mac. We will The importance of, sorry, the importance of using inclusive language and terminology has been recognized by the disability community for decades. CYDA uses person-first language, i.e. children and young people with disability. But many people with disability choose to use identity-first language, such as I am autistic, or I am disabled, or I am a disabled person. As noted through our summit, there is a shared belief among young people that people in power should be proactive in asking children and young people how they identify, and to just ask if you are unsure. Language is really personal. Please respect the language that people use to describe themselves, even if it's not the language you would make for yourself or your child. Child first language. We also encourage you to think about how you describe your child. Introducing your child with a list of diagnoses, labels, or disability types means that many people may only see or think of their disability or what they can't do. You might hear this called a deficit approach. For example, I'd like to introduce you to Sue. She can't drive a manual car, must have glasses for close work, and won't eat celery or Brussels sprouts. This introduction doesn't help you to understand what she can do, what she enjoys, and the skills she is working on. We are going to move on to the next activity. Using your favorite childhood things you wrote down before, what is the vision for your child? Write down, draw, or imagine the vision for the next few years. What do you want them to experience as a young child? What places do you want them to be a part of? There are some thought starters on the slide, but please take a few moments now to capture your thoughts. Having a vision for your child and your family might feel clumsy or artificial at first. Being clear about what you want for your child and things to aim for is bold and brave. If you are clear, your child is not constrained by what other people think or decide. You might not know everything about your child and their future right now, and that's okay. That is the same for every young child. Don't limit their vision. Be brave and be bold.
We'll give you 5 minutes individually, and I appreciate that there might be some people on the webinar who don't necessarily have a child with disability, but maybe an educator or working in the field. So I'd like you to think about someone that you know and write your vision for them. So a young person, a young child, hopefully, and we'll take 5 minutes to do that activity. just 2 more minutes for you to jot down vision for your child. Sue speaking. Mac, I was wondering if I could ask you another question about vision. So was having a vision for the future, or using other words, something that you talked about as a family when you were growing up, or did you have a vision that you wanted people to follow?
I think for us, the conversations came and go. Most of them would have been once I got a little bit older, as in around high school age range, the conversations came more apparent. And I think it changed as well. I think the visions my parents had for baby me before they knew a lot more about me would be very different from the visions they have now around me. We talked a lot about education. I was expected by a doctor to be one of those kids that don't finish high school, like drop out as soon as possible and be completely disengaged. So my parents' vision for me in regards to education is that I would do the best that I can. I think it was more, and whatever the best I can, that was good enough. And we were happy with that. But as long as I gave it my all, and then stubborn me interpreted that as, I'm going to finish at 12 and go to university because someone said I can't. Well, I am doing it now. But when it came to education, the vision was that I would just do my best. And when things started to pick up and I started to do a little bit better in school and high school, well, then the vision more shifted towards doing a career in whatever I wanted, and finishing year 12 was always like the goal, if that was feasible. There was times where we wasn't sure it was. We also I talked to my mom a lot about the vision of me more from a trans perspective, because the vision mom had for me as a little baby girl is very different than what actually came to be. And so we talk about how that vision changed as well, and what my future would look like compared to what was expected. So I guess when I have often conversations around vision, it's often after it's changed. I think that's just how it occurs, and we talk about it as more of a past tense thing. But as a whole, and I hope I'm not putting words in my mum's mouth, the vision was more that I would be happy and healthy to the best of my capabilities. And healthy is also including like all the different aspects of health, not just physical, because I think they're all equally important. And that I would be just living my best life. Yeah.
And Georgia, can I ask you about when you were younger, what sort of conversations did you have in your family about having a vision for the future?
I think that my parents' main vision for me was that I would be happy with whatever I decided to do with my life, and that I think that's why from a young age, they let me play with cars as well as dolls to sort of help me to know that cars aren't just for boys or dolls aren't just for girls. And I think that's one of the reasons that I am more comfortable with dressing how I want to dress depending on how I feel that day. And also why I feel more comfortable with my interests.
Thanks, Georgia. So we've talked this evening about childhood memories, and both Georgia and Mac have shared some really core but basic memories of their early childhood. So we were hoping that if anyone had any questions, that now would be a great time to launch into that, and shortly we'll take a 5-minute break. But if you had any questions, please pop them into the chat. So one of the questions that we have had in the chat message through is about the focus of these webinars and who is the audience. So I just wanted to take a minute, I suppose, to respond to that question and clarify that the 6 topics that we're covering in each of the monthly webinars, so May through to October, is a slow build on inclusion in early childhood, and taking the opportunity to hear direct from young people with disability about their experiences, their memories of childhood, and to give families and educators an opportunity to reflect on those experiences that young people are sharing. One of the things that we have observed through our advocacy work and also through the research that we've done over the years is there is lots of information out there on the internet and on social media about parenting, and there's lots of information about disabilities themselves, but there's not necessarily the voice of young people talking about their experiences and their reflections on their childhood. And we thought this was a unique and powerful opportunity to hear from people. And I suppose I'd ask Mac, have you got any reflections on how powerful it can be to hear from other young people about their experiences around their childhood and what's going on in their lives?
I think hearing from other young people is super powerful. I think it becomes even more powerful when we talk around it within the context of disability specifically, as young people with disabilities aren't always given the same opportunities to share our thoughts and our ideas compared to the general population of young people. So I find it even more so powerful. I think you're gonna get the best information when it is actually coming straight from us and not someone else's interpretation of the situation and our experiences, because at the end of the day, we're the only ones who know our perspectives and our experiences, and therefore we should be the ones who share it.
Thanks. Georgia, I suppose a question for you. The conversations that you have with your family members about early childhood and what you did when you were younger, admitting that you're still young for many of us now, what are the things that you discuss in those conversations? What are the most often topics that come up?
One of the things I remember was some of my doctors told my parents that I lacked the abilities to learn the patterns that would give me certain everyday abilities. For example, they said that I would never learn to read or write or anything like that. And my parents told me that I shouldn't listen to the doctors and that I can do what I want to do. And I'm now the top of my class in English. So, you know.
There's an appropriate response there somewhere to that. That's fantastic. So we've had one of the questions coming through in the chat is about hearing experiences about schools and educators. And I'm conscious that we've pitched this webinar about early childhood, so the experiences before school. And I'd encourage, apologies, Jennifer, to check back in, and there is lots of information about them. But I suppose, Mac, did you have any thoughts that you wanted to share with the audience about the things that you would really like them to consider for their young child?
As in for parents, what parents to consider with their young child? Yeah. I think, there are so many things. I think, firstly, it's important just to reiterate that we're children as well. I think disabled kids, and honestly, this kind of can go to anyone who experiences any form of marginalized identity, is often thrusted upon the world of adulthood very young, whether that is through the constant appointments and doctor's appointments or hospital admissions, and that health aspect that means you have to mature a little bit faster than everyone else, or whether it's from the sad reality of constantly having to advocate for yourself, which means, for me at least, at a young age, I was having conversations with adults around my access and fighting for my rights. So I think while both of those things are realities and kind of unavoidable for the most part, it's also important that we're also kids and we want to do kiddie things and enjoy our childhood just like everybody else. And I also think that something I think that's also important to note is that we notice things. So all those little things that happened when we were younger, all those little special moments that we remember them, whether it's directly or as we get a little bit older, we might not remember the exacts, but we remember the love, we remember the messages and the meanings, and that all those little things do shape how we grow up and how we perceive ourselves. And while it can be frustrating and overwhelming at times, I am sure my mom has definitely felt overwhelmed at times with parenting me and the difficulties that I have in regards to navigating the world that we live in, that we recognize the effort that you put in and the hard work, and that we do see it and we do appreciate everything that you do.
I suppose one of the other things, Mac, that I'd love you to talk about a little bit more is you mentioned the children that you went to kindy with, so your peers at kindy, and how important they are in your experience of kindy.
100%. I think I had very different, I went to two kindergarten, well, technically three, I think, because I was born in England and I think I went to kindergarten over there. But the two that I kind of have more memory on, I had two very different experiences. And I think peers have the ability to both positively and negatively impact our lives. I was the type of kid that didn't really let anything get to me. So I didn't have very good luck socializing at one of the kindergartens, mostly because the girls did girl things, the boys did boy things. I didn't want to do what the girls are doing, and the boys didn't want me to play with them. So I dressed up in a dinosaur costume and decided to destroy buildings and I guess Godzilla, but obviously 4-year-old me did not know what that was. I don't even think it was, I probably was out then. But so I guess in that shape, my peers weren't really having a positive impact on me, but at that time I didn't see it as a negative because I didn't really care. I just did what I wanted to do, which I think is also something also about kids, is that our interpretations of things can be very different from others. That situation could have looked like exclusion. But for me, I was just doing what I wanted and I was happy and content with that. But then with my other kindergarten, my cousin also went to, we're the exact same age, 2 weeks older. She likes to say that because she was 2 weeks late, she technically would have been born earlier than me. And that kindergarten had a very positive influence. I at that time we knew there was something there, but I didn't really have any diagnosis. And so I didn't really, but it also wasn't really an issue in kindergarten too. The kids were fine. We just played and had fun, because if you think about it, in kindergarten, you're not doing too much reading and writing that's complicated. You do what you want to do and you have fun. But I do remember all of those experiences, and looking back, it's nice to know that I just had your average kindergarten experience with those friends and just enjoyed myself. And I'm still in touch with a couple of them to this day. I mean, I'm my cousin, so obviously I'm still in touch with her. But I think what I really loved about kindergarten was just having that normality. I was just another kid. I was just another kid in kindergarten. And I guess the difference between the two is that in that space, we all played with each other. It didn't matter that I wanted to play the boy stuff, which arguably wasn't really boy stuff. That's just what we decided to label it. We all played as one big group. And in that space, because of not having those boxes and those strict rules, and we're allowed to be ourselves, I was able to make friends. I was a very social kid. I had lots of friends in kindergarten. And I think it just shows the impact that environments can have. The way we create a space for kids and for anyone can really impact how that person experiences that space. And because that kindergarten was a lot more, I guess, you had a lot more freedom to do what you wanted. The kids were less constraint on, I guess, gender roles and what was expected of you to do. And those barriers that were originally placed in front of me in regards to making friends and having fun were no longer there. I was able to have just as much fun and just as meaningful time compared to all my other peers.
We jokingly call that in our house the free range kindy. So, we might take this opportunity to take a break. So it's 7:58 Eastern Standard Time. We will come back at 8:05. So we're going to take a 7-minute break. So if you'd like to turn cameras and sounds off, and we'll let you know when we come back. We'll come back at 8:05. Thank you, everybody. Take a break.
Sorry, I lost track of time,
All good.
even though I got here early. Welcome back, everybody. Now let's explore where to start looking at communication, people, and places. I would like to call on Mac now to share a story.
So as I mentioned in my introduction, one of my favorite childhood memories was our yearly trips to Fraser Island, which were, in fact, for Mum, not so much a holiday, because she was there to learn and renew her education to continue her practice. So while she was there, busy learning, hardworking, my dad, myself, and then later on, my little baby brother, would spend our days fishing. And in Fraser Island, you actually had some success compared to the local piers down where I live. Spending days at the beach, watching the dingoes, swimming. We spent a lot of times in the pool. But one of my favorite memories is that every lunchtime, I would hop on my scooter and I would scoot down to the resort main building, which is where the training mostly took place. I thought I was being a big responsible adult because look at me on my scooter making my way all by myself to this building. But in fact, my dad could watch me the whole time. So, but I felt mature and grown up and I loved it. But I would go every lunchtime to meet my mum and all of the other osteopaths there and meet them for lunch. lunch was a buffet. And you know how buffets aren't normally, they're like the cheapest food possible, and it's not really that good quality food. This was like gourmet buffet stuff, so like the fancy foods. I would sneak in and join the rest of the adults during their breaks and have conversations with everybody. And that was one of my, I guess, one of the most fond memories that I think of when I think about my time and my holidays. Getting that opportunity to feel like an adult and responsible and independent, making my way down, but also getting to spend those lunch times with my mum. And I mean, I have to admit, the buffet was a very big considering factor. We do love the buffets in our family. That is the only way a hotel can be rated 5, is if they have a buffet. But getting to have those moments, and the thing is, we also went to the theme worlds. Like, so we had a big holiday, but one of the most special memories was that simple thing of having lunch with my mom every day.
Thank you for that, Mac. Now let's look at where to start with inclusion. We've talked about lots of possibly challenging new or different ideas today. Inclusion, identity, pride, memories, and visions for the future. So now we want to break things down into small, bite-sized, doable chunks. So where can we start with inclusion? The goal is to make sure your child is warmly welcomed and supported to be a part of things all children enjoy. Inclusion is not something that you can do as part of your day or scheduled for a particular time each day. Being included in everyday ordinary activities from as early as possible with any necessary supports will help overcome any bigger barriers down the track. So what can you do? Start with small bite-sized activities, such as going down to the local shops, heading to the park, or getting some coffee at a place you know. Something you can all do together to support each other. But make sure it's age appropriate. Match activities with your child's age and interests with other children. A handful of children to copy, observe, or share things with. Make sure that they are repeatable or replicable. If you think about the activity, what went well? And how can you do that again to repeat the good things? Where can you do these things? Your local community and places you know can feel welcoming and good places to venture out to activities with a range of people. But also new things and new places might give you the chance to trial things without people you know watching. This also means that places you can walk away from are safe places to try new things. Trying things in different places can build up confidence to make bigger, bolder steps in your local community. New places are also great for practicing how to introduce your child and family and ask for supports or other things for inclusion. Who can help with this? Parenting or raising a child is a marathon. It's a long and exciting journey full of ups and downs. That is the same for raising all children. It is always helpful to have a warm bunch of supporters along the way. Different adults have different experiences of disability and also attitudes. Sometimes inclusion will feel like a fight. Asking for acceptance and diversity to be respected will feel hard. You want people on your side who want to support you and your child. You may want different things from different people. Someone to vent to, someone to troubleshoot with, someone to share with, and someone to come up with ideas and plans, or just someone to cheer you on or be by your side. Look among your family and friends for who you and your child's allies are.
Thanks, Georgia. So we wanted to take another opportunity to hear your questions and to answer your questions. And one that we've had come through in the chat, and I'm going to turn to you, Georgia, for this one first. So what are some of the things that educators, so the teachers or the teacher aides or the educators, the centre directors in early childhood places, so it might be a kindy or a daycare or a childcare place or a local preschool, what are some of the things that educators could do to make young people feel included and welcome?
One of the main things I would think is every now and then, whether they look distressed or not, checking in on the child to make sure that they're okay. This is something, feeling emotions are something that more neurotypical children may be able to talk about easily, whereas children with diversities or disabilities may find it harder to talk about. So they should give the child time to respond, and if giving the child options, don't give too many options. In my experience, too many options can become distressing, and you may say something that you don't actually want.
Thanks, Georgia. That's really helpful advice. I suppose, Mac, I'll put the pressure on you now. What else do you think educators can do around inclusion in early childhood places?
There's a few things that come to my mind. I think, like I said before, just remembering that we are also kids. I think it's a message that we sadly need to repeat quite a few times to make sure that reminder is always there. I also know education is actually a huge passion of mine, talking about education in regards to inclusion and access, more so focusing on the slightly older age range. But through that, I have learned how little education is really taught around disability that is representative of the community and done by the community as well. So I think spending time to learn and educate yourself on disability is really important, as well as reflecting on your own perspectives of disability and how that aligns or looks different to the community is also really important as well. I think we're often afraid to have conversations around disability with little kids because we are uncomfortable or we don't know how that conversation is going. So spending some time to learn from disabled advocates, writers, there's a lot of resources out there. They can be a little bit hard to find at times, but there's stuff that do exist, can be more helpful to allow you to build that confidence in having those discussions with the kids and finding ways to incorporate disability into the conversation. So whether that be through picture books, because I know in kindergarten we had every morning, I think it was, we would have a big story that we'd read at a class. So finding ways to incorporate disability and diversity into the discussions. I don't think we give kids enough credit. They are often much more able to comprehend and understand things than we believe. When little kids ask me why I'm in a wheelchair, I give them a simple instruction and then I say, plus means going down hills is super fun. And they're like, cool, okay. Or they might think that's so cool, you get to go super duper fast. And so I think that's also another important thing. But when we are talking about having conversation around disability to the class, say if there is a child there that might have that disability that's coming up in that conversation, I think it's also really important to have that conversation with that child. And I also think talking to that kid themselves, I don't think kids, especially disabled children, aren't given the autonomy, but they know their lives best. They might just want an adult there to support them, which is completely valid. But they should also be given that ability to determine how that conversation looks, so it ends up being the most comfortable. I've had teachers who had good intentions of having a conversation about why I might be typing or I might not be reading or I might be doing things different, but they didn't talk to me about it. So I felt super uncomfortable. So finding ways to empower that child to have autonomy and control around how their identity is talked about also is important in early childhood, but it also sets up that kid to understand that that is something that they're allowed to demand and ask for, and that should be a given, and which then allows them to carry that on throughout the rest of their lives. So if we empower those kids, then we're also setting up really well, but we are also setting up those kids who aren't disabled to be able to be more inclusive as well. Like earlier when I talked about the environment with my peers, we need to start having these conversations at a young age so then they can support their kids, because disability occurs at any age range.
Thanks, Mac, and thanks, Georgia. We might move on now. And I suppose what we'd like to do is just reflect on, as Mac said, and Georgia said, some of these topics can be quite challenging, and particularly at 7 or 8 o'clock at night after a long day of either working, caring, or other activities that you've been responsible for. So we really do appreciate your time, but it's a great opportunity to reflect. And we've got a couple of suggestions up here, and I think I covered this before, but these webinars and the other 5 topics are really a slow burn. So one of the pieces of feedback we get from families is that they might attend a whole day workshop and it can feel quite overwhelming. So this is a conscious and deliberate choice to really leave you with some thoughts and then come back together. So one of the things that we would just like to say is that it's never too late to start. Start small and start simple, and find your allies, which can be slightly different to friends. It can be the people that support you and enable you, and they might be people different to what you've traditionally counted as your friends. So look out for those allies that might support you. So I suppose I'll just ask both Georgia and Mac, and I'll go to Georgia first. What's the one thing that you want families of young children to know about including their children early in their lives? So we talked about educators before, but the one thing that you want families to know, please.
The main thing that I can think of is when specialists say that your child will never be able to do something, don't listen, because kids can surprise you. They may be smarter than you think.
Thanks, Georgia. Mac, I'll give you the final word.
Thank you. I think for me, something that's important to know is that when you include us in early childhood when we're young kids, it sticks with us. So it has a huge impact and really shapes how we grow up and how we view ourselves in our lives. My parents gave me a lot of autonomy and say in my appointments, and I felt like I was in the decision floor. Slightly older on, for example, I was allowed to sit on the table when we were talking around access and join those discussions. So allowing kids at that young age to be able to have that autonomy and a say and a control, because I think it is something that a lot of children with disabilities aren't given. And while a lot of the time our parents are our voices and do support us, we do have a voice ourselves, and that it's really important that we uplift our voices at a very young age to what, of course, is age appropriate and what we're comfortable with, but starting that early so that we can grow up being confident and comfortable within ourselves.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Georgia. So I'll just jump onto the next slide, and this will show the topics that we're building on and the intention of this series of webinars. So our next webinar in June will be around early intervention and inclusion. Can we do both? How to do both? How to maximize both early intervention and inclusion? And we'll start to get into some of those more difficult conversations about attitudes around disability and deficits and what that means to young people with disability as well. So you can see there on the slide, and also in some of the emails that you will have received, the different topics that we're building towards. So we're not actually going to talk about school until number 5 in September. So I can understand that there might be some people who are keen to get into that topic, but stay with us, and we're burning towards that one in a slow pace. Conscious that we've had a really full discussion tonight, so we would encourage you to take some time to yourself, as rare as that may feel sometimes, and to access any of the supports. So on the next slide, we've got the information about where you can access CYDA information. So we're on all the social medias. And also, Miranda has posted in the chat for us some of the other resources that you might want to access should any of the conversations have been difficult this evening. So finally, I would like to say a huge thank you to Mac and Georgia for being our guides through this evening. I appreciate those that have posted through questions and comments and given us feedback. That has been brilliant. I'd also like to say thank you to Mac, to both of our interpreters. So hopefully we will see some of you in June. This session and the session this morning have been recorded. We will be uploading those onto the CYDA YouTube channel after I've cleaned up some of my mistakes. And we will also be including the materials. So you will have received slides and handouts and explanations, but we'll post those up with the YouTube videos as well. So please, everyone, take care. Thank you for your encouragement, and thank you, Georgia and Mac, for sharing with us your experience and your insights.